All right, everyone, here we go. Welcome to Velocon 2022. My name is Carlos Canto. I'm the community manager here for Velociraptor and here at Rapid7. I want to welcome you all to this really groundbreaking event. It's an event that's really been over a year in the making. And we just want to thank you for being here on this incredible learning adventure and this celebration of all things Velociraptor and DFIR. We have a really impressive panel of speakers that I'm really excited about. And we're not going to waste too much time. I just want to quickly go through some of the logistics for today. Here's the agenda for the full day. It's pretty much broken into 4 sessions. So we'll have 2 morning sessions, a break in between, and then lunch. And then we'll have 2 afternoon sessions with another break in between. I won't go through the whole agenda right now. Everything is on the Velociraptor website if you want to take a look. There is one audible that we're going to have to call today. We did have to swap around a couple of the presentations. One of our panelists is experiencing some challenging weather conditions right now, so he's not quite sure about his internet connection. So we kind of moved his presentation to the end. But other than that, the agenda is pretty solid as it's been for a few weeks now. A couple of resources for you guys as we go throughout the day here at Velocon. As you probably have noticed from the Zoom webinar screen, this webinar is being recorded in the cloud. We'll make this recording available for everyone at the conclusion of the event, and for anyone that didn't or that wasn't able to participate live. We are also live streaming this on YouTube. So if for whatever reason, and we are experiencing a pretty heavy attendance today. If for whatever reason you're kicked out of the webinar, you're experiencing technical issues and you just can't get back into the Zoom, you are able to stream the event on YouTube as well. If you just search for Velocidex Enterprises or just Velocidex on YouTube, it'll be the first one that comes up. Just click on the little dinosaur logo and you should see the event streaming right there. I will kind of ask that you don't, or kind of remind you that you don't just search for Velociraptor. You're just going to get a slew of, dinosaur and Jurassic Park web pages and videos and stuff like that. So make sure if you are going to stream on YouTube, make sure you're searching for Velocidex. In addition, we are going to be taking questions throughout the day from our panelists. Some of these questions will be taken live during the presentation. Some of them will be taken at the end of each individual panelist's presentation. We do ask that if you do have a question, you guys are probably familiar with the Q&A process here in Zoom, but we would ask, if possible, that you'd use Discord instead. The reason being, once the webinar is over, all of these questions will go into the ether somewhere and won't be able to retrieve them. However, on Discord, we'll be able to archive them. We'll be able to go back to them, answer you, after the event if possible, and if needed. So please go onto Discord instead. You can search for the Velociraptor Discord server, but probably the easiest way to get there is to go onto the Velociraptor website at docs.velociraptor.app. Right on the side navigation, there should be a link for the Discord server, but if you just append the Discord to the end of the URL, you'll get there as well. There is a channel within the Discord server called Velocon 2022. Please insert any of your questions in there. We will be monitoring that queue for those questions, and then we'll prompt the panelists to answer them in real time if they can. Okay, and with that, we're going to get started. It's just about 9:10. I'm going to hand it over to Mike Cohen, who almost all of you guys should know at this point. He is the father of Velociraptor. He has been at this for a while now. I've had the pleasure of working with Mike for just over a year now. I've really gotten to know him. He is a wealth of cybersecurity knowledge. He has over 20 years experience actually applying and developing novel incident response and digital forensic tools and techniques. He has previously worked in the Australian Department of Defence as an information security specialist at the Australian Federal Police, specializing in digital forensics, network and memory forensics. Mike joined Rapid7 to support and develop Velociraptor, which you guys all know is an advanced open source endpoint visibility tool. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Mike Cohen.
Thanks for that. Let me just share my screen. Continue. You guys see that? Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
You're looking
All
good.
right,
Yep.
cool. All right, cool. Let's just get started. So I actually originally had this talk at the end, and but because of the swap, I think it works just as well at the beginning of the conference. So I just wanted to kind of have a little bit of short kind of talk about some of, like just, remembering what happened this year. And it was just like a big whirlwind of a year. There was so much development and excitement happening in the past year. So I just thought I'll just, dive into it and go back and look at some of those features or things that we've done this year that are really useful for, developing and advancing Velociraptor. So let's just have a look. Okay. So the latest release is 066, right? And that's just came out, very recently, a few weeks ago, days ago. And it's really, really cool how much community engagement that we've got and how many people have contributed bug fixes and bug reports. And it has so many features. So let's just go back and have a look at some of the past year and what kind of features there are. So it's kind of like an unordered list of what I thought was kind of useful. So I just kind of like went through the commit logs and went through all the features and went, oh, that's cool. So the first one I want to talk about is the glob plugin. And as you know, the glob plugin is used to search for files, and it used to always have problems because on Linux, it would go into /proc and then just kind of get lost in all the symlinks, and or it might actually like leak into a network file system NFS and then start to get lost in there. So having this ability to put like this recursion callback in there, so we could actually like really tighten down how we're searching for files, really helps to control where we're going. And it turns out that searching for files on Linux is kind of tricky because there are lots of little pitfalls where you can kind of end up, going into, various file systems. So this is really important. There is actually also a blog post about that, but just bear in mind as, searching for files on Linux, you have to kind of like make sure that, and that's why the Linux file finder has been adapted for this. The other cool thing that we had, a lot of people have asked us to create notebooks that they could reuse, because notebooks, as you know, are just a way of reusing, of doing post-processing and looking at the data and communicating that and collaboratively working on analyzing results from cases. And so people found that they have a lot of these kind of common cells, these common queries. And so people wanted to import or export notebooks. So we can export the notebooks, but importing them is a little bit hard to do correctly because it has to be kind of in the context of whatever you're searching. So now it's possible to just like add these cells to artifacts. So when we create a new artifact, we can actually also add a suggested post-processing flow to it. So I just wanted to show you an example. This is already out there, it's just been there for a while, but maybe a lot of people don't know about it, is that you can actually add a notebook section to the artifact definition and define it as a suggestion. And so that the user can look at the notebook and then they just can use that cell as a suggestion. So they can, right click, and when they right click the menu, they get a list of suggestions. And then whenever we're collecting that artifact, that's, those suggestions show up. And so these are like suggestions of how to do this post-processing for this particular, like in this case, the generic client info, you can look at all the different, when you're doing a hunt for this, then you can find all the domain roles. And then, in this case, you can, label the domain controllers, for example, very easily. So this is what that suggestion does, right? So we can just add it in and it just creates a cell automatically with that. And then we can just, use that. to do specialized post-processing. So it's one of those features that's been there for a while, but maybe a lot of people don't know about it, and it's not that well used. So maybe we could use it more. The other really cool thing that happened, over the last year is the binary parser has been like really put through its paces. And I think I've talked about this before, that in Velociraptor we have a binary parser that we can use to actually parse binary data using VQL. So the cool thing about it is that you can write pure VQL and you can do some pretty serious parsing. So some of the artifacts that have been used with the binary parser are like link files, which are fairly complex, and we really put the binary parser through its paces. The other really cool thing that I wanted to mention here was the Cobalt Strike configuration parser that Matt Green has written, and that is, I think, like a really super cool example of how much you can achieve with this, with this parser, because it's actually a pretty powerful parser, and this is another really cool example. So prefetch files. We used to have a Go-based parser for prefetch files, but it turns out that it's just easy to parse it with VQL. I mean, maybe it's a little bit slower, but it's not that important, because then if we have to modify it or change it, we just really change the VQL, and then we can change the way that we're parsing. So we can support, slight variations in the future. So it's much more maintainable. This is an example of what it looks like, and if you've ever seen, volatility or recall type profiles, it's a similar thing. It has a profile and you can define the binary parser. So it's one of those things that if you're not really super familiar with binary parsing, take the time, have a look at it, because it's super powerful feature that's really matured this year, and and it's really quite powerful. With the link parser, we can parse link files all in VQL, just pure VQL, and we can extract, the targets of, the link files, because, that is actually, an area of concern, link file parsing. This is the Cobalt Strike config that I mentioned before that Matt wrote. And it's really an amazing artifact, the amount of details that it can actually extract from memory. It actually carves out, it's a carver that carves out the configuration file from the Cobalt Strike configuration file from memory, which is XOR encrypted. So it then decrypts it and then extracts all the data and parses it. So which is pretty amazing how it works. It's probably one of the best examples of how to use these binary parsers. It's really cool. So I'm actually I'm pretty excited about that. That was really cool. The other thing that we found was, like if you run Velociraptor from a year ago, it would just look like a completely different application. It would just be, much slower and more frustrating, and and so it's just nice to look at the maturity of the tool. One of the things that we've added was the in-memory search index. Before that, we used to have the search index on disk, and it was always very slow, and there was limitations because you had to kind of access the disk all the time. And by moving the index into memory, that makes it instant. So we can do like a lot more cool stuff with it. We can search, for example, by MAC and IP addresses, which change all the time. So we couldn't really do it on the disk because it would have changed all the time. And now we can do that. And then the other cool thing is we can estimate hunt impact quickly. When we're doing a hunt over thousands of machines, we want to make sure that we don't, that we target the right number of machines that we think we are targeting, right? So, for example, like in the hunt manager, now there is a little, informational box here to tell us how many clients we think that we might impact, right? So, if you are targeting by label, as in this case, and then you want to, you think, okay, I've got probably like, 10, 20 machines, but, maybe the label's applied on thousands of machines or something like that. So it's just like a double check to say, hey, this does make sense. Does that make sense? And as you can see here, we can also look at how recently machines are active, right? So 1 day actives, 1 week actives, and 1 month actives shows us, how many machines will be impacted that are likely to have this hunt. So if the hunt only lasts for a day, we probably only care about 1 day actives, So this feature is only really possible by having this very fast index so that we can search for it, which was really cool. So that was a really cool feature that made it kind of like nice to use as well. In terms of parsing and parsing, there's lots of extra parsing going on. One of my favorite types of artifacts, plugins that we added was the Authenticode and PE support in Velociraptor. And we actually have an Authenticode. We can parse not only just the Authenticode signature and the PE files, but we can actually also resolve catalog files, which is really interesting, because a lot of files on Windows aren't really signed with PE Authenticode. The way that they are signed is through catalogs. So we could never in the past do that because the file itself doesn't have a PE structure. It doesn't have Authenticode in the PE structure. Instead, you just have this hash, and the hash appears in a catalog, and that's how it's signed, right? So, for example, in Notepad, if you right-click Notepad, it doesn't show that it's signed, but it is really signed. So that is actually really important because it helps us to filter out all of those signed binaries that are legitimate, so that we can easily focus on those non-signed binaries. So that was a pretty cool parser. And then we have a lot of UI-based changes that make the UI much easier to use. In this, I just wanted to show some of those artifact parameters. As you know, when you write an artifact, you can have parameters and you can give them different types. And so we used to have like very simple, like, string or integer or whatever. But now we actually have a lot of specialized types for parameters. And that means that the UI can actually be made to help the user to write the correct type of artifact. So for example, when we define an artifact as a regular expression, the UI has a regular expression editor. So then we can, trap errors. We used to have problems like, someone would run a hunt and then have a problem in the regular expression, or like it would be invalid or something. And so, they would do all that work for nothing because none of the artifacts would work and come back, right? So having this regular expression editor and validator UI really helps. So here's an example of one of the artifacts, generic detection Yara glob. And I just wanted to show some of the cool features of these parameters. These are all just defined in the artifact as parameter types. And we've got the Boolean and date selectors, so we can choose that. But even here we have an upload URL, so we can actually upload an entire Yara rule set. If it's got many rules, we can upload the whole thing into the artifact when we launch it. So it's just part of the parameter. Then it just appears, in the VQL ready to use, right? So you don't really have to do anything special to handle this upload. And then down here, we have a Yara rule. So there's actually a Yara editor with syntax highlighting. So it allows, people to actually edit the Yara rules and, and that sort of thing. So it makes it easier to edit Yara rules. Another cool thing that I thought was useful to mention is the ability to have multiple OAuth 2 providers. And this is something that a lot of users ask for, especially if they're doing consulting. And sometimes when people are consulting for external customers, they want to allow the the customer to also have access to the Velociraptor server. So maybe only read-only access, or but just to be able to log in. And it's always very difficult because before, we could have always had OAuth 2 providers for Velociraptor, but let's say you're a company that's doing, consulting, and let's say you use Okta. and you use Okta, and so you log in with Okta, and that's great. But then you want to give someone else access to your Velociraptor deployment, but they don't have Okta, or if they have Okta, it's not in the same org as you. So it's very complicated. You're going to have to create like accounts and share it with them and assign it to them, and it's very complicated. So this feature where we can actually just have multiple providers, that really helps a lot. So here's an example of what the login screen looks like when you have multiple providers. Is you can basically say sign in with any of these credentials. It's all good, right? And so you can just allow them to sign in with their own provider or their own identity or whatever. And then when they sign in with their own credentials, and then they get access to. So it doesn't matter from Velociraptor's point of view who is authorizing this user, as long as one of these providers is authorizing, that's fine, right? So so if we do that, then it allows us to share Velociraptor with all the customers. So that's a really cool one. I really, that's one of those things that's not very difficult to implement, but it's so useful, from the user perspective. I love these kind of features, right? The other thing that we had is a whole bunch of effort around documentation and sharing and community building. And the whole point of Velociraptor is to build up this community where people can exchange, VQL artifacts or exchange knowledge. And so now we have knowledge base, and we have an artifact exchange. These are places where people can share their experiences. So if you go to the website, we have the artifact exchange where people anyone can submit their artifact. They can share their artifact, click this button, and then paste it into the GitHub form. Or you can search for an artifact that you could use or want to look at. And then we have a knowledge base as well. So when people ask questions, that's been incredibly useful because a lot of people ask the same kind of questions. And so these are really small, like bite-sized pieces of information, like how do I do this? How do I do certain things? And so it doesn't have to be like huge blog posts with lots of screenshots and stuff. It can just be like a very small, like 1 or 2 paragraphs. And and this kind of thing is like super useful. So if you ever have any kind of questions, check out the knowledge base first, because it's probably in there. And if it's not in there, then just add it in there so we can all share those questions together, right? Then we have so one of the interesting things that in terms of VQL that was added this year was path handling in VQL. And path handling is really complicated because paths are just so badly defined, right? There's there's Windows paths and Linux paths, and then there's registry paths, and the rules around paths are actually very complicated and not very consistent across different operating systems. So in VQL, there was a big change that we made internally to be able to handle paths in a consistent way. So paths are no longer just strings, right? They're actually objects that are aware of what they're doing. They're aware of paths. So a path, you might notice that an OS path starts popping up in all these VQL queries. And OS path is really an object that represents a path. And it means it retains the fact that it's got little components, right? So each directory in the path is a component. And then it means that we can use that object to just kind of do path manipulation very easily. We can just add paths together and so concatenate them and split them. And so we don't really need to do things like splitting on slash, which was done like so many times, before that, because it's actually very flaky to do this kind of splitting on slash. And sometimes it's not slash, sometimes it's backslash, sometimes it's forward slash, sometimes there's 2 slashes, it becomes very complicated to really handle that correctly. So OS paths really just does away with all that and keeps everything consistent as all the way through. I just put a little bit of VQL here just to show you like some of the way that this OS path makes writing VQL so much easier. You can see that when we're doing a glob, then the glob plugin actually emits this OS path, which is an object. And then if we just want a directory, path, we just go call .dname. Boom, there's a directory. And then we can append a string to the directory with an addition, and it overloads addition and creates another path, so it already knows that, if you add a string to it, it's going to make a path, inside of the directory. So these kind of operations basically are done very transparently. So, here we are, checking the base name, which is the last part of the path, right? So we don't really need to do these splits on slashes and, these things that we did before. So if you haven't really played with OSPath and understood how that works, I really encourage you to do that, because it makes writing these artifacts so much more easier. Another big feature we had was dead disk analysis. A lot of people wanted to do dead disk analysis. And to be honest, we don't really do a lot of dead disk analysis, because just doesn't scale. Like, you're not going to really get a disk image these days for DFIR. But, some people still do it. And so that feature went in. It was quite a major feature to make it work. It was enabled by having this very accurate path manipulation type that I mentioned just before. And it turned out that although this feature was like, we don't use it that much, but it turned out that it makes it really, really easy to create these tests for artifacts. Because when you have an image, then you can essentially say to Velociraptor, hey, imagine this is a Windows machine, and you might just be an image of not a full Windows machine, but like an image of an NTFS drive. And so you might just run all the artifacts on that and have these regression tests. So we use it heavily in the testing side of artifact testing side of the code. So it turned out that it's one of those features that, like, we didn't think it would be super useful, but once we put it in, it actually turns out really useful, but not for the original purpose that people wanted it for. Finally, the coolest new things that I just wanted to mention is the process tracker. And there is a blog post about it. I'm really super excited about it, because it's one of the examples of kind of like, I guess, this kind of trend that we are seeing. And in having Velociraptor enrich and develop this information about the endpoint, just by collecting this information all the time. So the process tracker is a feature in Velociraptor where it keeps track of processes on the endpoint. And it basically just kind of like keeps track of exited processes and their relationship. So even in the future, if you ask it, hey, where did this process come from? Even if the parents of the process have exited or something like that, then the process tracker can answer that question, because it's seen it before. So it's kind of like where we are collecting extra information. When you think about it, forensics is really all about trying to, try and reconstruct the past. Well, why do we need to reconstruct the past? Because we didn't record it properly in the first place. So if we can actually just go through and record whatever happened correctly, then we don't need to reconstruct it, because it's there, right? So if we have a record of all the processes, where did they start, where did they end, what happened, then we don't really need to kind of figure it out. We just ask it. So this is kind of the point, of the process tracker. So this is an example of the process tracker figuring out, that this notepad has actually gone, from a peers exec. There's a blog post here. You guys can take a look. But it's actually like, it really opens the door on really cool, cool new possibilities. And then we had lots of, small changes that just make it really cool to use the tool. So we have a large number of themes to choose from now. And this is one of my favorite. It's the pink one. But you can see there's a big list of different themes here. And they're pretty cool. I'm just going to show them off as I go along. And then we can have different languages, which is actually pretty cool as well. I was very excited about that feature, because our user base are, obviously global in nature. So it's kind of nice to have, have it in your own language. I mean, not everything is translated, as you can see, like the artifacts themselves are, obviously in whatever language, they've been written in, but the interface in general is, a little bit translated. Which is kind of cool. The other cool thing that I thought was useful is the time zones. Now, I know initially we were like hardline, you're doing forensics, you're going to use UTC. But like using UTC and everything is really kind of annoying and it's confusing, right? And so if your case is, centered around a particular location, Sydney, Australia, or whatever, then you just want to be able to see your time zones in that time zone, in that time zone, or all the timestamps in that time zone. It doesn't really matter because at the end, all the timestamps always have the time zone in them anyway, because they're all standard RFC based timestamps. So it doesn't matter, but being able to change the interface, the whole interface, into the different time zones is really helpful because you can change and see, times in the relevant area. And this is a really new feature that's been added in 066. Having a right-click menu where we can just like copy a cell and send it to VirusTotal. So in here, for example, we're calculating a hash because we're doing a PS list. So we're calculating a hash, and we can just right-click the hash and send it to VirusTotal and see whether the binary is, legit or not, whatever, right? So it just makes it very quick to just do like a spot check, and we can do SuperChef and Google and other things as well. So it's quite neat, and it's also configurable, so people can change that. And then finally, the last cool feature is the Multi-Aux support, which is just coming in 066, and it's a huge feature, but it's actually really cool, and it makes it so much better. Because you can now create different OGs in the same Velociraptor deployment, and you can separate clients into separate OGs and switch between them, and they're completely separated, so they're just kind of like they're separated. So you can use that to separate clients into groups, and it actually makes it really easy when you have a lot of customers, because you can onboard them in a new OG, do the IR. And then at the end of the job, you just destroy the org and move on, right? So you don't really need to constantly be building new servers or whatever, right? And also, it's much more efficient in terms of in terms of resource utilization. So if you have a Velociraptor server and then you only have a small customer, you can probably put them in an org on an existing server. You don't need to create a whole other instance just for that. So that's a really cool one. There is a link here if you want to read more about it, but it's actually super easy to use. All you do is you go in to the UI and switch orgs, and then it tells you on the on the top right which org you're in. So it's still kind of like experimental for 066, but it's a huge feature that would be really useful. Finally, resource controls on endpoints. That was a big one. People, one of the risks with running queries on endpoints is that we don't know necessarily, how much resources it's going to take on the endpoint. So now we've got much better control over CPU loads and so on. And it's just up there. So we have like real resource control, real CPU limits. And then we had performance stability. We had master minion architecture, which allows us to scale up to very large sizes. And I've got a screenshot here, and you can see that a user sent it to me to, you can see that's 125,000 odd, endpoints. So, and this is, I think it was like 8 minions or maybe 10. So that gives you an idea of the size of the deployment. So that's the architecture, and, there's a blog post about it. So, and it is the same Velociraptor that everyone else is using. It's just used in a slightly different configuration. So just to wrap it up, where do we need to go next year? So that was the past. It's nice to reminisce over, last year and see what we've done. Where do we want to go? So we want to go with better stability, scalability. We want to go up to much bigger sizes. And I'm going to talk later on about Client Velociraptor, which is, the next scale up. We'll talk about that. IDFIR parsers, and concentrate a lot on client monitoring queries. The process tracker is really exciting in terms of the possibilities that it offers. And we can use the same idea to monitor for more information about the endpoint, And so really we do a lot of work on this and then build alerts as, I know that some people say that Velociraptor is an EDR, but it's not an EDR because it doesn't really have alerts right now. And there's not really any way to escalate. I mean, it is, but it's clunky, right? So we need to run streamline this this alert mechanism and make sure that we can handle it much more efficiently. So that's the next year, but ultimately, it's not really up to us to dream up what we're going to do next year, but it's really up to the community to help drive this future development. I mean, without the community, we couldn't really, be where we are. And it's really those bug reports, feature requests, and ideas that we're getting back from our community that help us build the tool that you want to use, right? So at the end of the day, we need to really need to get that feedback, and we appreciate everybody's, filling in, issues on the GitHub and so on. So join in to Discord, GitHub, and have a play with Velociraptor. I don't know how I'm going for time, but I'm not sure if I have.
We're just up against the first time slot here.
Okay.
Mike, we don't have any questions. We do have a comment in the Discord channel. If you want to kind of just answer that or speak to that.
Okay.
The comment is, process tracker looks like Velociraptor is wading into EDR territory.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, as I said, I think it's really cool, right? Because, where was it? I think it's been.
It was in the Discord channel.
Yeah. So the process tracker, I'm just going to show you the process tracker again. Yeah. So we're kind of finding out these kind of things. So Velociraptor's, philosophy is endpoint visibility, right? So I don't like to put labels on what we want to actually do, but we really want to increase visibility. And I think the point that I made before was that, we talk about forensics. And when you think about what is forensics, what's the point of forensics, right? The point is to try and figure out what happened, right? That's kind of what forensics is, right? So, forensics is really kind of like an after the fact kind of thing. So you come in and you're like, okay, what happened? But really, when you think about it, the reason that we're coming in after the fact is because we didn't record that information, in the first place. So if you're doing an IR and you don't have Velociraptor and then you deploy Velociraptor, then to look at historical stuff, you're going to need forensics, right? But once you have Velociraptor in there, well, why don't we actually figure out recording, what actually happened, and and then we've got the information in much higher quality data than we can get with just forensics, right? Because we can control the the recording part. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. The goal is not ultimately, it's not really a label thing, right? I don't like to label it. The goal is to figure out what happened, right? And whether you call it EDR or forensics or whatever. I mean, they're just different methods of answering those questions. But at the end, we really need to know those questions, like how did this process get there? What did the process do, in the past, that kind of thing. So so is it wading into EDR? Maybe, but ultimately, EDR is so much more, and it's a different focus, right? So there's going to be some overlap, I guess, but we'll see. I mean, at the end, we're just going to develop something that, that would be useful, for people, right? So, cool. Is there any more questions?
One more question. Can you expand on the capabilities of the offline collector?
Okay, so the offline collector was kind of like, I didn't include it because we didn't really do a lot of work on it in this year. Well, no, we did a little bit of work. We've got resource controls on it, and but it's been like there for a long time. And really, the offline collector is what people use when they don't have Velociraptor. So, if people come into Velociraptor from a DFIR triage background and they're using like CAPE or other sort of triage tools, and and they don't have Velociraptor installed, then the offline collector is a great on-ramp, right? But it's it's kind of limited. Like you can't do things like this. Like you can't do process tracker because it's not running all the time, right? So it can't, and it's more of a one-shot thing. So, you know, I mean, it's okay to use for collecting a lot of files, a lot of data, but that's not really what the, rapid triage philosophy is really around, right? Rapid triage is about being able to, pivot and collect, very targeted, data. But, with the offline collector, you tend to collect everything, all the MFTs and all the, prefetch and all the files, right? So you don't really kind of iterate through because you don't get a chance to, because it's not running all the time. So the offline collector is a good feature, and a lot of people use it, right? But I would consider it as kind of like an initial feature, like an onboarding feature when people are getting kind of familiar with it. But ultimately they'd use the real thing, in the end.
Cool. I think with that, we should move on to the next segment. But
cool,
thanks.
Thank you.
Enlightening as usual.
Thanks.